Hi, I'm Ted Milich, and this is the fourth vlog in my series about egalitarian, practical, effective, dynamic governance. I'm going to tell you some stories, some anecdotes that I've heard about sociocracy. Once upon a time,
I was always waiting not for success, but waiting for a crisis. In 1976, we had a huge crisis. I had to fire 60 people within a fortnight.
This happened during a business downturn in the shipping industry when Vandenberg Electronics in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, which installed electrical systems on ships, lost 30% of their business. Vandenberg, as CEO of Vandenberg Electronics, looked at the numbers and believed that there was no choice but to lay off 60 workers. Because this kind of decision fell within the limits of his sociocratic authority, he announced the intended layoff to members of the General Circle and others in the company. The day after the decision was announced, one of the fitters in the manufacturing department, Jan de Groot, said, "We don't work like that anymore," and asked the secretary of the circle to call a meeting as quickly as possible. The manufacturing circle elected de Groot as their representative to be on the General Circle, the team that runs the company. The General Circle met right away. De Groot was then designated as a representative to the Top Circle, which alone had the authority to spend the company's reserve fund to keep paying the fitters who would have been fired.
And in the beginning of the meeting, they were blaming me. And I was sitting there and saying, oh my goodness, huh? This is my fault, and so on. And then the creativity came in. It was amazing to say, I can say it afterwards. Huh? At that moment, I was very nervous. And the creativity came in, and there was a plan.
To replace lost revenue by taking fitters who were underutilized and training them to do some marketing until there was more fitting work. And de Groot said, "Ik zou veel liever mijn tijd," he said, "I'd much rather spend my time wiring generators than knocking on doors with a suit on, but I'll do it if it means keeping my job."
And they had consent. And then I said, okay, I give also my consent.
So what happened? Anybody?
After 3 months, we solved the problems. It was amazing.
The technical installations department was downsized, but several other departments started to grow. Only a few workers were laid off a few months later, and since then, Vandenberg Electronics has developed a much more diversified customer base. And what did you learn from all this, Meneer Vandenberg?
It gives me the feeling that the power of creativity is enormous. And we are ignoring creativity not in a technical way, but in a social way, always.
Happy ending. This last story comes from a family using sociocracy for family meetings. Isabel Dirkes in Germany learned of sociocracy through NVC, nonviolent communication. The International NVC organization has adopted sociocracy, and rightly so. The two go very well together. Sociocracy could be called nonviolent governance. Nonviolent communication is a great tool. It shows us that when we have a problem with someone, we can look at our needs, and it gives us great clarity. Then NVC teaches us how we can, despite feeling hurt or whatever, come up with requests to help take care of our and the other person's needs. So, Isabel started using sociocracy in meetings with her family. Then she went through a divorce, and she couldn't afford their house anymore.
I had made the decision we have to move out of this big house now because it's too expensive, I don't have the money. I brought in this in a family conference with my children, but I asked for consent to move out of this house. And one son, he said, no, I give no consent, this is my home, I don't want to move. And I said, but...
Isabel didn't know what to do. They couldn't afford to stay there. Should she trash the idea of giving her son consent in family decisions? She didn't want to do that. What then could she do? This is the moment that Vandenberg labels with the scientific term chaos. It's sometimes necessary to get to that place before real creativity bubbles up and you have a new solution that everyone will consent to. So, Isabel and family talked about it and came up with the idea that they could rent rooms out in their new house. So, they did that, and now they have 3 renters in the house, and they don't need to move out. And
now I have the money to live in a sustainable way. I'm now much more willing to listen to objections in the working situation. They take more responsibility for what is happening in our family. Financially, they have in mind what effect has my action in my family.
Another happy ending with Sociocracy. My next blog entry will have some video clips from the interviews I've done with people who use Sociocracy. So, until the next vlog, live happily ever after.